This is probably a common question, and I bet it changes all the time. But what is the best-selling merch item right now?
I think whenever we have an artist that does a reissue of a vinyl record, especially a a fan favorite, maybe it's a record that they put out and it's a 15-year anniversary or a 10-year anniversary, and we see and we get the chance to help them with a vinyl reissue. Those always sell the best, right? I think that there's obviously a massive resurgence for vinyl over the past 10 years, maybe a little bit longer at this point. But we always see those being the most desirable product. And those are always the type of campaigns that I feel like get the biggest fan reaction when we're able to reissue a fan favorite. And that also goes for new records. There's a lot of new vinyl releases when an artist puts out one of their new albums, and we do the pre-order for it. Those always tend to sell really, really well too.
How about clothing?
You can't go wrong with a black t-shirt, right?
Yeah.
That's really the bread and butter of what we do. So I feel like black t-shirts, or really any t-shirts, and hoodies and long sleeves are the core, the core product offering. But we had the ability to get really creative with products for our clients, even on the apparel side. Like there's a lot of custom made garments that we'll partner with our clients to do the design and the sketch, and really get specific on the type of clothing that we're designing for them. So that's always exciting when we get to work on those sorts of projects.
Okay, that being said, then what would be the sweet spot price point for something like that?
Would you say for the t-shirt, hoodie, or a vinyl?
That, and also for the custom merch that you're just talking about.
I feel like right now t-shirts that is selling at concerts, it's really 30 bucks. I feel like that should be the going rate. Obviously you go to some huge arena shows and you see artists selling shirts for 55, 60 bucks. That's a little much. I mean, I feel like 30, 35 is really the sweet spot. And that's jumped up. I feel like when we first started, it was still 20 bucks. And that was pretty standard. But given the price of cotton and the price of garments going up so much over the past 4 or 5 years, I feel like we've seen that price kind of push a little bit closer to 35 bucks. Maybe for a hoodie, 60 bucks. I feel like that's pretty fair as well.
And you just mentioned about custom items that you work with your various clients on. And I'm sure you can get more money on those, but how much more?
Like on the custom apparel that we
Yeah.
work with, that we design,
Yeah. Is there a
they
sweet
definitely
spot?
sell at a premium,
Yeah.
and I feel like because the cost of it is significantly more to come up with a t-shirt from scratch. Obviously have more, they're more costly, but they're not outrageously priced. They're still in line with what a standard black shirt would be.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Here's something that I bet every indie musician wants to know. What piece of merch has the highest profit margin?
It really depends on the volume that you're printing, but I feel like, again, black t-shirts, it's a bread and butter. You can't go wrong with it. I feel like, especially, and we're always big advocates for making a kind of a consolidated product line of 3 to 5 items most. The last thing we want is for artists to go out and it look like they have a flea market at their merch table. We want to make sure that they have a handful of options, and when artists are able to do that, obviously they're able to print more and really get better cost, right? That some bulk discounts for the items that they are printing. So I think that, yeah, t-shirts is definitely the most price of cost effective item, I feel like, and you can really get the most margin if done right.
Now, I know that you have some high-end artists, but I'm sure you also have many indie artists that are playing the scene, and probably the same scene that you and I grew up in. Now, that being said, there are fewer and fewer venues these days. So how does that impact the merch business?
I think it impacts artists really at large. I think it kind of it trickles down. I feel like less places to play, less options. Obviously, a big consolidation to the Live Nation shows, where really there are instituted like merch cuts that the artists have to pay. I feel like that's probably more impactful, and that really being the norm is something that the artists, especially independent artists, kind of have to be mindful of. And I wish there were more independent venues. There's it seems to always be one or two that go out every single year, which is
Mm.
unfortunate, especially since COVID. I feel like that's the trajectory that it's been on. So unfortunately, you're right. There's significantly less options, and that's really not ideal for artists, or the community.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One of the things I was surprised at, I read somewhere that one of the reasons why many clubs are going out is because of alcohol consumption being down.
That would make
And,
sense, right?
and who would have thought? You know?
Yeah, the kids just aren't drinking anymore.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense to me.
That does make sense. I mean, I feel like when I was growing up going to shows, there was a lot of all age halls. I mean, we would just make our own venue. Like we would play at a skate park or we would play basement shows. So that's always an option, right? And when there's a will, there's a way. I feel like if there's a community or a scene, I feel like there's always a crop of bands that are willing to get kind of creative and figure out their own way to do it.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that sort of surprised me, and I don't know why it should, maybe because I haven't operated on this level before, advances from a merch company to an artist. And I read your article, actually. I saw it in Hypebot. And I thought to myself, gee, I had no concept of that happening, but that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean it's similar mechanics than that as a record label, right? As a record
Yeah.
label advance and trying to solidify a deal with an artist for a long-term contract. It's very common in our industry.
Huh. Okay. But that's obviously a higher end artist that's doing that.
Usually, yeah, usually that's really a way to try to win some bigger business. It's kind of commonplace to have to come in with some sort of advance or something that's attractive for an artist of that size.
Yeah, sure. What's the most unusual merch item that you ever had to create or deliver?
Axes. So we did axes for this artist Ice Nine Kills. We've done hammers for a artist Kubla Khan. So yeah, just that's probably the two strangest ones. But I feel like we've done kind of like across the board. I think I always say, like, if you can think it, we could probably brand it and make it into a merch item. So we've done beverage collaborations before. It's like really the sky's the limit.
How easy is it to source stuff like that? Only because you're up against large retailers that are buying in much greater bulk than you probably are in something like that. So, is there a long wait time to get delivery on it?
There is for a lot of the really customized product. There is a longer wait time as opposed to a lot of the cloth items that we produce in house, where we're able to, in some instances, we're able to produce a day of. But if we're doing highly customized specific products, yeah, sometimes there's a long waiting period, especially over COVID. I mean, that any expectations were out the window. There was some stuff that we were waiting 3, 4, 5 months for delivery, but because it's sourced overseas, there's always a logistics component with trying to figure out timeline and costs for getting it into the States. So it's really kind of a gamble on not a gamble, but it has its own elements every time we explore doing a new type of product.
Has the tariffs affected you at all?
Slightly. The tariff on cotton, that has had an impact on costs for the majority of the product that we're producing. That's really been the most impactful. But luckily it hasn't been detrimental.
Okay.